businesses and corporations, and the fourth is serving on the State Lands Board, so essentially overseeing our public lands and waterways, our state lands and waterways. So I got more information on that, but I really wanted to talk tonight more about what it means, the work that you all are investing in terms of this engagement process, which I think is so critically important. But let me start with a couple thank yous. First, of course, to our hosts, to Jen and Patty, thank you all. To our organizers, Anita, Dorothy, I know a lot of folks, so thank you all for what you've done. I want to say also a real thanks to the shoulders that we stand on, and specifically I'm thinking of Howard and Dixie. It's just, you know, it's been such a difficult transition to not having them here, but I swear every time I'm here I feel their presence. I mean, it really still feels like they're here with us. So yeah, let's and then also to say of statewide impact, there's a service going on right now in Portland for the late Deputy Director for Senator Wyden, for Mary Gautreaux. So I told them I was going to be here with friends, but I wanted to just recognize her and the work she's done statewide for our state as well. And then also the builders. So have you ever heard that story about the definition of optimism? When a kid sees a stall full of horseshit and grabs a shovel enthusiastically and says, "There's got to be a pony in there somewhere," and starts digging. So I really want to pay my respects to Casey, our fearless leader, who's done remarkable work for us. And as I like to say,
shoveling.
Trust me, I've seen it. She has carried the water for us. As I like to say, she stands tall, and if you see us stand next to each other, you know that's
It's not so much.
But she has worked very hard to bring our party together, and I've been at meetings where I've winced at some of the hits she's taken on all of our behalf. So she's done a remarkable job. So thank you, Casey, also for your leadership. And then those builders, those folks who are going to go, who have been knocking on doors, who will knock on doors again, and will engage folks. I mean, you are by picking up those clipboards, that's the equivalent of that shovel, and you're digging and looking for those ponies. And they're out there. They're out there. So, but let me say this: if you're going to be engaging voters, inevitably you're going to be asked, "What's a Democrat?" So, how do we define ourselves? What does this identity mean? And when did you first become a Democrat? I know I was raised by Democrats, a mom who believes in social justice, and union grandparents who worked hard or were passionate about social justice. But what does a Democrat mean? So I thought I'd be a good student and go to the DPO website, and this is what I found there. We believe in rights and responsibilities. We work for a present and future society that treats every individual with dignity and respect, provides for the health and education of future generations, grows Oregon's businesses and local economies, safeguards our civil liberties and democratic rights, and protects the natural environment in which we all live. That's a great definition. But you know what, I actually heard a better definition of what it means to be a Democrat recently. I was at Pendleton Roundup, and sitting with a good friend of mine who, in the Teepee Village, she organizes the village every year, and was sitting with her and her father. We were talking politics, and there were some kids that were there, some young teenagers. And they were talking to each other, and one said, "I want to be president someday." And the other said, "Well, are you a Republican or are you a Democrat?" And he was like, "What's a Republican?" And he said, "Well, you know, like Trump." And he said, "Oh, well, what's a Democrat?" And he said, "Well, that's like if you care about people." And I love that so much. I love that so much. So that has now become my favorite definition of what it means to be a Democrat. But quite honestly, it's really not that simple, is it? Because especially in the past couple of years, we've seen squabbling amongst ourselves since 2016. You know, accusations of the deck being stacked by party power brokers, not sufficiently addressing privilege. We've lost some like-minded people to non-affiliated or to even other parties who are frustrated with the party politics that they see. We're not drawing in younger people. That point was made very, very well before. And a lot of folks who just, you know, younger folks, what I've heard is, you don't get it. You don't get the fact that I've grown up in this time of endless war. You don't get the fact that I'm in debt and I'm terrified. You don't get the fact that climate change is going to kill me when I get to be your age, and you don't get it. And so addressing those issues is critically important to make sure we're being responsive to the needs of folks who want to feel heard. And that's a real key piece of, it goes to the showing up piece, but it goes to also really being responsive to members of our party and our communities who are poor and people of color and rural folks as well. And so Audre Lorde said, it's not our differences that divide us. It's our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences. So how do we live up to this thing of being people who care about people? Well, we show up and listen, and it's okay to listen to people who think differently than we do. It doesn't mean you give up your values just because you're listening. We stand in that uncomfortable place when our privilege is called out, because it's okay to feel uncomfortable when someone is helping us to see what we don't yet know and we haven't been able to see for ourselves. And we bridge the divide, because it's okay to talk about our values in a way that people can hear them, and to look for shared values. We must not fear human decency, either ourselves or finding it in others, because that's really our strength and not a weakness of being a Democrat.
No, okay. I'm fine. Careful your pen.
So one of my favorite speech lines was from our very flawed Bill Clinton, and he said, "There is no us and them, there is only us." And to me, I know it's aspirational, but it's such a powerful statement, because to me it doesn't erase the people who are overlooked now. It really allows us to see them, and to see us, and to be seen. You've heard me now, you guys all know, so I've been talking about the urban-rural divide for 2 years. And I was recently shocked to hear someone talking about, framing what I was talking about, and the bridging the urban-rural divide, as really being equated as attacking progressive values and disrespecting our diversity. And I was shocked by that framing, because for me that is a willful erasure of the rural people of color we have, especially tribal communities and Latinx communities. Here in the 2nd Congressional District, almost 20% of the population are people of color. And so for me, rural communities and seeing that is really part of that as well. And also now, you know, my family lives in Jefferson County, and I serve on the ESD board, the Education Service District Board. And in Madras, which is the largest high school in the ESD, we're actually a third. A third tribal kids, a third Latinx kids, and a third Caucasian. So for someone to be dismissive of the people of color in our district, that's, you know, erasing over half the students that I serve. I was also shocked at the willful ignorance of hate crimes in urban areas and being responsive. We've seen that, and we have to address hate crimes throughout our state, throughout our country. And they've been literally triggered and supported and enforced by the president we now have, who we need to be replacing next year.
Yes.
But I was also shocked at the dismissiveness of all the really hard work that goes on in our rural communities to fight poverty and to build partnerships to address water quality and environmental issues, and to make rural communities safer for women and people of color and LGBTQ kids. Caring about people means ensuring that their voices are heard in the halls of power here in Oregon and really across the country. And that's important work that I believe Democrats do. So when I talk about bridging the urban-rural divide, I'm not blurring our values, I'm really claiming them. I'm sharing what I have heard so that we can see what has been overlooked. So like the young Latinx dreamer in Southern Oregon, actually down in the Talent area, who I met, who was 1 month shy of his nursing certificate, in a region, by the way, that's facing a pending shortage of nurses, when he was walking home, wrong place, wrong time, and picked up, and because he was a dreamer, he was then shuttled around from, Laurel's expression is exactly, that you can imagine the story. And I heard this in a house party, because this is a kid who would never show up at an event like this because he wouldn't feel safe there. transferred from incarceration facility to facility until the Trump administration got tired of playing politics with his life. Like the Nisgawa student from the Umatilla tribe, who wrote to me and said, when you talk about families living below the poverty line in Oregon, you're talking about my family. Like the wheat growers in Wasco County, who showed me their burnt fields and talked about climate change and said, yeah, it's real and we need to work together to address it. And like Jaden Bell, the LeGrand High School student who 6 years ago, after coming out and being who he was and joining his his school cheerleading team and being a young gay man who was proud of who he was, he was bullied mercilessly, and he, in person and over the internet, and he took his own life. These folks matter, these kids matter, and not giving them a voice is really unacceptable in this state. And a lot of these are rural folks, and so this is part of, again, who we are in the voices. When rural voices speak up and say, no, we need to be heard throughout Oregon, but in the halls of power, it's because these are voices that are being overlooked right now. So how does that fall upon us, we who care about people? Well, until we bring their voices into the election process to help accomplish critical public policy, we're failing them. We're failing until we engage them in being part of the economic engines of our community, until we incorporate their views in how we can be managing our state lands and waterways, and until we include them on how we audit the use of our public resources. We will continue to fall short if we cannot bridge that divide between us. By not listening to their voices, we're failing to accomplish critical public policy. By not hearing the Pendleton students that I marched with last year, who bring a rural voice to call for gun safety, we're failing to accomplish that critical public policy. By not hearing the economic despair, by not supporting solutions of new economic opportunities, we're failing in some of those public policy opportunities. And by not hearing students who are calling for a meaningful response to climate change, and that's from Portland, which it was just I was up there, the streets were flocked, it was inspiring, to students from Eugene who filed a case, to students in Ashland, in my alma mater, turning out and really talking about it. Until we hear and respond to the needs of those kids, we are failing them and failing to be responsive to the needs of addressing climate change. And by not hearing the perspective of frontline workers also in the audit process, we're failing to really address public process the way we should be doing it. Oregonians want solutions and want us to work together to find them. And if we, as Democrats, really do care about people, then we need to learn how to connect with more of them. And that's the work we're talking about doing through the outreach process. We need the courage to do it, because we've all been there when we've had a conversation with someone who thinks differently and responds in a very difficult way. To stand in that place, find that inner calm, and still have the conversation we need to have. We also need the leaders who are going to guide us on this path. Baba Dangme had this great quote that I love. He said, in the end, we will only conserve what we love, we will only love what we understand, and we will only understand what we are taught. So leadership matters. We have some great urban representatives, but we also need a progressive voice that represents Oregonians statewide. Last year, I had a conversation after, got a call from a guy from Eastern Oregon after the Hammonds were pardoned. You remember that? And he had a lot of details on that, and he wanted me to know. So we had a long conversation about that, and he shared a lot of information with me. And then when the conversation was wrapping up, and it was all, detailed data, and I've done a lot of policy studies, and that's what I spent a lot of time doing and having those conversations last year. But by the end, it was kind of winding down, but it was clear that he wanted to say something else. And finally he said, can I ask you something else? And I said, sure. And he paused a really long time. And then he said, yesterday my son came out to me, and what should I do? Now, I've studied a lot of policy issues. I could talk policy with people. Now, fortunately, in this case, I had some expertise as well, because I come out at 19. So, but I didn't. I was actually surprised at how many times I had those types of conversations with folks in the most conservative parts of our state. And in his case, I just simply asked him, I said, do you love your son? And he said, of course I do. And I said, start there. That's what he needs to know. But we have these types of questions. Leadership matters throughout our state, and it's not simply policy issues. You need to be up on policy issues, but making sure we're representing the people and addressing the issues throughout our state is a critical part of the leadership that we need to make sure we have statewide. So this is the higher purpose that we seek to achieve, but don't mistake kindness for weakness. We often hear that, but it's a real place of strength that we come from when we choose to be kind and when we choose these policies. And this is the work that we use to develop solutions and to establish accountability. If we're going to win the hearts and minds, it's getting out there and making those connections, earning the trust of voters, and that's how we not only build stronger and healthier communities, but frankly, that's also how we win elections. And that's a critical part of it as well. So let's make sure as Democrats, we're asserting our values, not abandoning them when we step forward and talk to those who may think differently than we do, when we seek the possibility of common ground, and build those relationships we need to really strengthen our democracy. Because this is the fundamental work of rebuilding our communities. We've taken a huge step back under the Trump administration, and we've seen it in our communities. I read a statistic that 1 in 6 people have stopped talking to a family member or a friend after the 2016 election. We have that rebuilding work to do, and that's on all of us. And this is really the fundamental work of protecting and rebuilding our democracy. And so this is something that I am committed to doing. I know you are as well, and I hope we can continue to do this work together. So thank you so much for inviting me. Thanks again to those who want to be involved.